Hi everyone, welcome. Today Shannon and I will be talking about attachment. So, what do you think about when you think about attachment?
Oh, attachment is actually one of my favorite things to talk about. And I think just starting from more of a general sense, kind of like what is attachment? And I think about attachment as a psycho-emotional process that's invisible, internal, but it's something that's dynamic and changing throughout the lifespan. What do you think about attachment?
Yeah, I think about it, it's evolutionarily important. In fact, we need to attach to survive as infants, but as you said, it's also a lifelong thing that we do, and it can look different depending on maybe we're attached in one way to one parent and one way to a different parent. Maybe we're attached differently to our partners when we're an adult. It can look different over time.
Absolutely, that's a great point. So as humans, we don't have a one style of attachment, that we can kind of have a mixture of attachment styles that can change, be different in different types of relationships. And really just wanting to add to what you said, that though there are different attachment styles, none of them are wrong or bad. We're not pathologizing any of the types. We're really recognizing each of the types in their own wisdom and acknowledging that there's always room for improvement, but really, our attachment styles are perfect as they are, and they help us function in the world and to get those needs met.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Well, should we talk about the 4 different styles?
Yes.
Okay. So we're going to start with talking about secure attachment. And secure attachment in a young person might look like a little child who can easily play with toys, and also when they have some needs, they're easily able to communicate them and get their needs met by their caregiver.
Absolutely.
What do you think about when you think about secure?
I think you're right on. It's one of these attachment styles that can also easily identify their needs and can move in and out of being in relationship and being alone with a relative amount of ease, that there's no anxiety or emotional kind of bubbling up that happens in those transition spaces.
Yeah, you might say they play well with others and they also play well alone.
Yeah.
It's not very stressful to go in and out of relationship.
Right.
For folks who are securely attached.
Great.
So Tatkin calls the securely attached folks the anchors.
Yes.
So on that note, let's move on
to the next one.
Yes.
Great. So next we'll be talking about the avoidant or dismissive attachment style, which Stan Tatkin has coined it the island. And I giggle because it's just so fitting. What do you think about when you think about the island style?
Well, I think about kids who needed to, for whatever reason, support the self-esteem of their parents. So in sort of island households, if you will, kids are rewarded for being quiet, for playing alone, for being well-behaved. And so they learn to be really self-reliant, and they actually really usually think that that's a good thing. They want to be independent. They don't actually like their own needs very much, and they don't like other people's needs very much. They'd rather just, when they're in interpersonal stress, go in their own room and deal with them themselves, and then come back when they're feeling more grounded.
Right, yes. I think the one thing that I might add to the island style is kind of this ironic dynamic that's happening. The island, while they're going to that alone place to cope and move through whatever is happening, they're actually really craving connection. But they don't always know how to ask for their needs. They might not know how to get their needs met in relationship because of what Lindsay was saying. with caregivers not being consistent. So it can cause a lot of kind of internal confusion with, I'm going alone to meet these needs, but I still really need that connection.
Well, that makes me think about island folks often overuse auto-regulation. So they'll kind of regulate themselves with maybe a device or an activity or a thing. You also see this very early in the strange situation where young kids will be very interested in the toy. And so when the caregiver leaves, it will look like they don't really care. When the caregiver comes back, again, they'll be playing with their toys, will look like they don't really care. But they've actually studied the physiology of these little kids, and actually they're very stressed out inside. They've just learned how to not show it.
Yes.
Because that hasn't, been adaptive in their environment.
Great. Yes.
Okay.
Let's talk about the next one.
So the next one is called angry resistant, or the wave. What do you think about when you think about the wave?
So I smile again. I just really appreciate Tatkin's brilliance around kind of renaming the attachment styles. When I think about the wave, I truly think about this in and out dance that happens around getting needs met. Almost like a love-hate, kind of 1 foot in, 1 foot out experience. And really the wave as a child has inconsistency with the caregiver in terms of getting their needs met. So they may, kind of scream out as a kid, this is the need, and it'll get met. And then the next time they scream out, the need wouldn't get met. And so it causes a lot of anxiety in the individual, just trying to guess, well, are my needs going to be met or not?
Mm-hmm. And that makes me think about how those signals then can get amplified.
Yes.
Not only in maybe screaming more loudly, but in their own experience, they'll feel the signals really, really strongly. And what you were saying before about the need being met or maybe not being met, another thing that's very common with waves is that they've had to regulate their parents' emotional state. And so sometimes there's things like role reversal and that kind of patterning in a wave. But because of that inconsistency, often waves are very preoccupied with relationship. Where are you now? Are you coming home? What's going on? What are you thinking about? They really are very invested in connection and being with the other because they're worried about abandonment and worried that actually they're not going to be met.
Yeah, and to add to that piece, when the wave is coming in for that connection and really wanting that engagement, there can also be kind of this underlying anger that surfaces up around, well, why aren't you telling me where you're at? Or kind of anger for having the need in the first place or having to ask for the need to be met in the first place. So it can show up with a lot of different emotional patterns when that attachment is being activated.
Yeah, and that makes me think about the little kids in the strange situation where they'll be very distressed when their caregiver leaves, and then the caregiver will come back and try to soothe them, and they'll be very angry, just saying, like, why did you leave me?
Right.
How dare you leave me? And also, how dare that I have such needs that I'm dependent on you? And that's the kind of the angry resistant part and that wave that going back and forth.
Yes.
I need you, but I hate that I need you.
Exactly. Great. Okay. Should we keep going?
Yes. All right, the next style is called disorganized, and Tatkin didn't give disorganized a metaphor?
Right.
But you had one.
Yeah, so students a couple years ago said, why don't we call the disorganized style the boat? Because it's kind of, in the ocean, maybe in the storms, going to the island, caught in the wave, not an anchor, right? But kind of bouncing around in the different styles. And so that's what first comes to my mind when I think about the disorganized attachment style is really this creative way of trying to get the needs met, but there's no consistency in the behaviors that get those needs met. Is that making sense?
Yeah, usually folks who are organized in a disorganized way, if you will, their structure is disorganized. There was no consistent way to get their needs met. in their environment. So often it's correlated with lots of trauma or parental mental illness, substance abuse, that sort of thing. And so you can watch the person who's organized in this way trying many different ways, but there is no structure, hence the disorganized part. I also wanted to say that even for those folks who are secure or insecure, many of us have pockets of disorganization. That's not a structure of disorganization, but again, maybe you're a wave, but you have, maybe a big loss that you have that's sort of unprocessed, and that might be a pocket of disorganization within an organization.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm trying to think, how might a child show up in kind of that disorganized way?
Yeah, you can feel folks who are disorganized in a certain way. How it might look is the parent can come back from the strange situation and the kid can freeze and collapse on the floor, or they can approach backwards, or things that for some reason, you feel it in your body watching it. There's something that's, I don't know, it's a little disturbing.
Okay. Yeah.
What do you think about with either kids or adults?
Right. Much the same. We're really looking at individuals who are acknowledging maybe there's a need. They may not know exactly what the need is. Again, that might be kind of an unconscious or subconscious process until it's examined further. But again, this really creative way of how do I get my needs met? How do I interact with my partner, parent, whoever it is, in a way that feels safe? And so when I'm thinking about approaching backwards, it's like I'm craving that closeness, but it's scary to face, right? Yeah.
I think that fear is really important because sometimes with folks who are disorganized, their caregiver was also the perpetrator.
Yes.
And how confusing and terrifying that can be.
Absolutely. Yes. And so really, just to recap again, is there anything else you wanted to add?
I don't think so.
Great. So to recap again, while different attachment styles may have certain levels of emotional dysregulation that come with them, the opportunity is really looking in and understanding attachment style from just a general perspective and acknowledging that each of them have their wisdom. And so while in the counseling relationship later in life, hopefully just supporting that client wherever they're at.
Yeah. And that being said, folks, their attachment style will show up under relational threat. Yeah. Like if my partner is suddenly going to leave me, that's when you'll see my attachment style, not just every day going through my life typically.
Right.
But I want to revisit how this is important as a therapist working with clients.
Great. Yeah.
Any ideas on that?
Oh, so many ideas. So attachment in therapy is interesting. You'd see this a lot with couples or individuals who are maybe processing relationship style in counseling, because what tends to happen is we hire partners. I think Tatkin also uses that phrase. We hire intimate partners that trigger our attachment process. And so you might have an island type and a wave type that are in relationship together. And you might imagine how a wave could be very intensive or very deliberate about getting those needs met. And the island might have this reaction like, whoa, this is too much. I need to leave the relationship. And so you may be working with attachment in your clients, but it's also coming in on the personal level because we as therapists also have attachment, right?
Absolutely. And that's just something to be aware of, is your own attachment and how that shows up as a therapist. So for example, if you're a more wavy person, you might be worried that your clients will leave you and you'll feel abandoned. If you're a more islandy therapist, you might not like your clients who are very needy. You might think that they're too needy. and you'd actually rather be left alone sometimes. So all of these things can be triggered in the therapeutic relationship.
Absolutely. And so just taking that extra time, having the awareness, one, of your own attachment style as therapist, and working with the client so that they can navigate maybe what their attachment style is. And if it feels relevant, really processing that in therapy. What is it like to be a wave? And all of those things.
Yeah. And then hopefully gaining more flexibility in the way that we are with others.
Right.
And we get our own needs met, and we can get our needs met by being in relationship.
Yes. Great.
Okay. So on that note, we'll end with a bow.